Today's Council decision marks a historic day. Europe is sending a strong signal. We are serious about our priorities, and this landmark deal will create growth, opportunities, and greater prosperity for European citizens and businesses. We are creating the largest free trade zone in the world. That's a market of 700 million people. And Europe is starting a new era of cooperation with our partners in Latin America and beyond. I will soon travel to Paraguay to sign the agreement.
The Mercosur trade deal is a bad deal for Ireland. It will devastate farmers, rural economies, and the fabric of rural Ireland. It will see the importation of a substandard product. We are trading one of the best products Ireland has to offer and export right across the world. And we are trading this with an inferior product, a product that actually has carcinogenic material. It is that serious.
The EU-Mercosur trade deal has been called many things over the past few years. A geopolitical breakthrough, a climate disaster, a betrayal of farmers, a lifeline for consumers. But behind the slogans and the protests lies a simple question that cuts through the noise. In a Europe struggling with high food prices, war-driven inflation, and climate commitments, who actually wins and who loses from opening the door to hundreds of thousands of tons of South American meat? In this trade economics briefing, we're going to unpack the EU-Mercosur deal in plain language. We'll look at what's really in the agreement, why farmers are revolting, why consumers might quietly benefit, and how this trade deal exposes a deeper tension at the heart of Europe's economic model. Let's start with the basics. The EU-Mercosur deal is a trade agreement between the European Union and 4 South American countries: Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. It has been negotiated, stalled, revived, and renegotiated for roughly a quarter of a century. At its core, the deal is a classic trade-off. The EU opens its agricultural market further to Mercosur exports, and in return, Mercosur opens its industrial and services markets to European companies. On the agricultural side, the numbers are striking. The deal allows around 99,000 tons of beef, 180,000 tons of poultry, and 25,000 tons of pork to enter the EU market under preferential conditions. These are not random figures. They are carefully calibrated quotas designed to give Mercosur exporters meaningful access without completely overwhelming European producers. But for many farmers in Europe, those numbers are not reassuring. They are alarming. To understand why, we need to look at how European agriculture works today. Farmers in the EU operate under a system of relatively high production costs. They face stricter environmental rules, higher labor standards, and tighter animal welfare regulations than many of their competitors abroad. They also benefit from subsidies under the Common Agricultural Policy and from tariffs and quotas that limit cheaper imports. This combination has allowed many European farmers to remain profitable, especially in recent years when food prices have surged. Now, add Mercosur to the picture. Producers in Brazil or Argentina can often raise cattle or poultry at significantly lower cost. Land is cheaper, feed is cheaper, regulations are lighter. When those products enter the EU market under reduced tariffs, they put downward pressure on prices. That's good news for retailers and consumers. It's bad news for European farmers who suddenly find themselves competing with lower-cost imports. This is why we've seen tractors blocking roads, Stop Mercosur banners, and farmers' unions warning of existential threats. The protests are not primarily about consumers paying more. In fact, the opposite is true. European families are already paying high prices for food, driven by the war in Ukraine, energy costs, fertilizer disruptions, and broader inflation. In that context, cheaper imports from Mercosur would likely help ease some of that pressure. The farmers' revolt is about protecting their own economic position in a market that is about to become more competitive. So if farmers are likely to lose and consumers are likely to gain, where do corporations fit into this picture? On the European side, industrial exporters stand to benefit significantly. The deal opens up Mercosur markets to European cars, machinery, pharmaceuticals, and services. For many large companies, this is the real prize. On the Mercosur side, big agricultural exporters gain more secure access to a wealthy, stable market. Large retailers and food processors in Europe also benefit from having more supply options and lower input costs. In other words, the winners are fairly clear: Mercosur exporters, European industrial firms, and, to a more modest but real extent, European consumers. The losers are European farmers and potentially some of the EU's environmental and climate ambitions. That brings us to another key dimension of the deal: standards and sustainability. Critics argue that the EU-Mercosur agreement risks importing deforestation, weaker pesticide rules, and lower animal welfare standards through the back door. While the EU insists that its food safety rules will still apply, the broader concern is about production methods. If beef is raised on land that was once rainforest, or if crops are grown using chemicals banned in Europe, then the deal may undermine the EU's climate and environmental goals, even if the final product meets technical safety standards. This is one reason why the agreement has faced strong opposition, not only from farmers, but also from environmental groups and some political parties. It's also why the European Parliament has pushed for additional guarantees and why legal challenges have been raised. The deal is not fully in force yet, and its final shape may still change. But even in its current form, the EU-Mercosur debate reveals something important about Europe's economic strategy. On one hand, the EU wants to diversify its trade relationships, reduce dependence on a few key suppliers, and secure access to raw materials and markets in a world of rising geopolitical tensions. On the other hand, it wants to uphold high environmental standards, protect rural communities, and respond to a cost-of-living crisis at home. The Mercosur deal sits right at the intersection of these goals. It offers cheaper food and new export opportunities, but at the cost of increased pressure on farmers and potential environmental trade-offs. It's a reminder that trade policy is never just about tariffs and quotas. It's about whose interests are prioritized when those decisions are made. For European consumers, the picture is mixed but not mysterious. In the short to medium term, increased imports from Mercosur are likely to help moderate prices for meat, especially in a context where many households are struggling with high bills and stagnant wages. For families who have watched their grocery receipts climb month after month, that matters. But those same consumers may also care about where their food comes from, how it is produced, and what kind of agricultural landscape they want in their own countries. For farmers, the challenge is structural. Competing with lower-cost producers in a liberalized market is extremely difficult without either significant protection or a shift toward higher-value, differentiated products. Some European farmers may adapt by focusing on quality, local branding, or niche markets. Others may not be able to survive the adjustment. For policymakers, the question is whether they can design flanking measures, compensation, transition support, stricter sustainability conditions that make the deal politically and socially sustainable. That's not just a technical issue, it's a political choice. So where does this leave us? The EU-Mercosur deal is not simply a story of good or bad trade. It is a case study in how modern trade agreements redistribute gains and losses across different groups: farmers, consumers, corporations, and future generations who will live with the environmental consequences. It shows how a single agreement can simultaneously lower prices, increase competition, raise climate concerns, and trigger protests. For trade economics, the key takeaway is this: when you hear that a trade deal is strategic, always ask for whom. Strategic for exporters, for consumers, for rural communities, for the climate. The EU-Mercosur agreement is strategic in the sense that it deepens ties with a major agricultural and resource-rich region at a time of global uncertainty. But it is also disruptive, especially for those whose livelihoods depend on the current balance of protection and competition. As the debate continues, one thing is clear: the Mercosur deal has forced Europe to confront a hard truth about its own model. You cannot have permanently high protection for farmers, permanently low prices for consumers, ambitious climate goals, and expanded trade access all at the same time without trade-offs. The protests, the legal challenges, and the political hesitation are all symptoms of that underlying tension. In future briefings, we'll track how this deal evolves, what safeguards are added, and how different sectors adapt. For now, the EU-Mercosur agreement stands as a powerful reminder that trade is never just about goods crossing borders. It's about choices, who is shielded, who is exposed, and how societies decide what they are willing to trade away in the name of strategy. This Trade Economics, and see you in the next